What's up, my fellow Web3 hackers? In this video, I'm going to be auditing GMX v2 live as promised. I'm going to be going through the withdrawal functionality for the first time live and show you how I implement my auditing process when I'm literally just going into a new area of the code base and trying to gain context as fast as possible. I literally had not read through the withdrawals area at all before I recorded this. Now I have slightly cheated. I've looked through all other areas of the protocol at this particular commit for a few dozen hours before this, and in fact spent hundreds of hours auditing this particular v2 code base in prior forms in the previous few months. Now I was actually fortunate enough to uncover a critical vulnerability while I was recording this. So for all of you currently participating in the GMX v2 Sherlock contest, this is my gift to you. So I guess the only thing I ask of you is that you subscribe and share this video on Twitter so we can help out more auditors. But first, before we get started, my name is Owen. Over a year ago, I founded Guardian Audits, and since then we've uncovered dozens of critical and high vulnerabilities from auditing hundreds of smart contracts, and we spent the past few months auditing GMX's fantastic new v2 codebase. And my goal is basically to help you gain context on GMX as fast as possible so you can uncover as many bugs as possible in the Sherlock contest and show you what my auditing process looks like so that ultimately you can become a much better auditor than I ever could be. All right, let's not waste any more time and get straight into the audit. All right, fantastic. So if I'm starting off looking to go through withdrawals, the first place I'm going to go to is the exchange router. So I'm going to pull up the exchange router contract. And the first thing I'm going to do is basically zero in on the functions related to withdrawal, right? Because I know that this exchange router is essentially the entry point for users interacting with the system, right? So I'm starting off where users are going to enter the system, and I'm basically just going to follow the path to see how somebody can withdraw their liquidity from a GMX v2 market. So I'm going to go straight to withdraw. We're going to go ahead and find that. So I see that there's a create withdrawal and a cancel withdrawal. I see that there's also a simulate execute withdrawal, which is interesting. And that's everything I see that's related to withdrawals. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off and see how a user creates a withdrawal, and then we're going to go from there. And I'm going to use command click. I'm going to be using that a lot. This is probably my favorite thing about IntelliJ. Of course, other code editors have it as well, but I just find that IntelliJ has the best indexing for Solidity and smart contracts compared to others like VS Code. Okay, so I see now we're in the withdrawal handler, and they're basically going to validate that withdrawals are enabled. And then I see we're basically just going to invoke a library method that will basically go ahead and create the withdrawal, right? So before I go into this library method, I'm going to try to get a high level understanding of what's on this withdrawal handler contract, what it is, what it's doing, and just get a main understanding of it. See, there's a withdrawal vault. I'm assuming that this will hold all of the funds when withdrawals have been created, but not necessarily executed. So sort of a temporary storage of funds before they've been executed and that liquidity has actually been added to the pool. I see that you can cancel a withdrawal. One thing I'm going to add here, because it's something that we've seen throughout the contracts in other areas, is that this might revert if we're calling this after the withdrawal is removed. So if a withdrawal is removed from the withdrawal sort of store, then this cancel withdrawal, if I just quickly peek at it, they're going to validate that the withdrawal account is not the zero address, and in that case just revert if it is the zero address, aka if it's like an empty withdrawal. So if you try to call this cancel withdrawal, you would be expecting to cancel the withdrawal, but the transaction would actually revert. And if the transaction would revert, the keeper wouldn't even attempt to execute it in the first place, and it would basically postpone the execution of a withdrawal. And basically what can happen is potentially an attacker can use this postponing and perhaps be able to control when the withdrawal actually goes through and, come up with some sort of risk-free trade, create a withdrawal, wait until prices move in your favor, somehow make a risk-free trade off of that. So that's just an audit tag that I'm leaving. I'm not going to dive deep into that right now, but something I'm going to come back to and see how a revert here could potentially yield an attack vector. Cool, and I see they have another simulate type function here. We've already gone over, or at least I've already gone over a few of these simulate functions throughout the contracts already, and I have a finding that's related to these, but I'm not gonna just give those away for free, but there's definitely a finding related to this right here. One thing that I'm noticing that is new to withdrawals, I believe, for this particular commit, is that we have a range of block numbers. So this is going to be interesting. I'm just going to note it as something to pay special attention to and understand as we continue. So here I'm basically just reading, and as I'm reading this, a thought popped in my head, which is, what if they could make this error selector here that when they get from the revert reason bytes, what if I could make this error selector match up with something that would qualify as an empty price error if I'm sort of causing a revert from an external call. So for example, if I had a malicious token and I was able to implement the contract of that token, maybe I could make a transfer of that token revert and yield this error selector and ultimately make this error utils revert happen when we're trying to cancel the withdrawal. So in this way it would yield a similar sort of attack vector to the one I just described. Cool, so I've got a high level understanding of all of the functions and different things you can do on the withdrawal handler. I didn't look at each function too closely, but I just made some notes on some sort of like initial red flags that I had. And now I'm basically going to just continue on and look at a create withdrawal in the Withdrawal Utils library. Okay, cool. So I'm seeing basically we're recording the transfer in, and that should have been, correctly sent by the exchange router. They're validating that you sent at least the wrap network token in the execution fee, and then they have a sort of like a utility here to handle any excess of a fee. I'm gonna assume that they basically just send it back to you or credit it with your withdrawal or something like that. I'm not going to dive into that right now because I want to get to understand this function at a high level and see if anything sets off flags to start with. One thing that I'm going to note here is just to check to see if I as a user can make a difference, a significant difference between the estimated gas limit and the actual amount of gas that the keeper ends up spending to execute my withdrawal. And this could possibly lead to some sort of gas attack, or maybe even the user being able to control the execution of the transaction, which would be even more critical than just exorbitant gas expenditure. Okay, cool. So nothing too crazy there on the first pass. So I'm going to basically go back to the withdrawal handler, and I'm going to take a look at the next step in the process, which is going to be the execution of the withdrawal, right? So here we are. This is the execute withdrawal function, and we see it's global non-reentrant, only the order keeper, and we're populating prices for this. Cool, so let's just go straight to this function. So I see we're getting a range of two lists of a list of minimum Oracle block numbers and a list of maximum Oracle block numbers. I'm not going to look at the mechanics of that right now because I'm still just getting a high level feeling for withdrawals, but that's certainly something that I'm going to look into on, a second, third, fourth, fifth pass on this line of code. And right here, I'm just leaving a reminder for myself to come back and validate these params, validate that they just actually match up with this type of execute withdrawal params. With all the different structs and params, objects being passed around in these contracts, there's a non-zero chance that there's honestly just a params object that has the wrong address at the wrong spot or something like this. So that's something that I just want to note to come back and actually check all of these as I go through. Cool, gonna hop into this library function. Cool, so something I'm just wondering right now is basically how can this condition get met, right? Because I notice if we go to the actual creation, when we create a withdrawal, we validate that the market token amount is not equal to 0. Otherwise we revert. And then so additionally, when we go to actually execute the withdrawal, there's another check, which is great for safety, but off the top of my head, I'm just wondering how this condition could be met. And I actually want to look really quickly at I'm assuming it looks like you cannot, unless I go to the exchange router. I'm wondering if you can update a withdrawal, and it looks like you can't. Cool, so the only thing you can update is an order from the looks of it, which is fine. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave this as a note here because I'm interested. How could this condition be met? Maybe it can't be met, and it's just a precaution. Now I see how the ranges of the minimum block numbers and the maximum block numbers are used. I'm assuming these block numbers are coming along with the prices that were recorded, and then we validate that the updated at block is in between that range. Now this line got me thinking a little bit because there used to be before withdrawal callbacks. It looks like there isn't anymore, which is great. But this got me thinking that an attacker might be able to control the execution of this transaction. If, let's say, just imagine there was a before callback, what an attacker might be able to do is in the before callback, probably before this validation is run, if it was before this validation, what they might be able to do, and they might be able to do this some other way, is transfer some of their market tokens, if not all of their market tokens, to a different address, and optionally only do this until they want the withdrawal to actually go through. And then this would have to be combined with some method to get around the cancellation of the withdrawal. from the store, and it could yield a potential sort of like a risk-free arbitrage withdrawal or something like this. So what I'm going to do is just leave that as a note. I'm not too confident that it's going to turn into an actual attack vector, but it's something interesting and something I might think about later. Cool. So then I'm seeing that basically what this function is at a high level is a bunch of validation and then the actual meat of the execution, and then some events, a callback, and then the execution fee. And you know what I find helpful is to sort of get very familiar with the structure of functions, with their geometry. At least personally, this makes me feel like I really, when I come back to a function, I sort of recognize like, oh yeah, this function is basically just a bunch of validation up here, and then here's where the interesting bits happen, and then there's some sort of managerial type functionality down here. It just helps me sort of index the code in my head in a certain way that, okay, now I feel familiar with this function. The next time I come back to it, I'm going to be able to actually notice things on a deeper level, right? And take the next level lower and sort of be able to have enough headspace to actually focus on the lower level things and investigate the smaller details. So right off the bat, something interesting that just popped in my head is, what if we could force this to fail? And that's literally all I'm going to write here, just an interesting thought. And then I'm going to basically continue into execute withdrawal. And right off the bat, something I'm interested in is when the withdrawal gets removed from the withdrawal store. So I'm actually just going to see if I can find that first. Here it is. Okay. Now this is getting interesting because immediately I can see that, okay, we remove it here, then everything after this actually reverts and it will not be canceled. So to drive that in, I'll show you exactly what I mean by that again, which is right now we're at the execute withdrawal function and we're inside of this right now. If we make this call revert, we will go in here and we will go into this function, which is at the bottom of the withdrawal handler. And basically we'll do some stuff and then we'll attempt to cancel the withdrawal. And the reason they want to cancel the withdrawal is because they don't want it to sort of, for exactly the reason that I described, they don't want attackers to basically be able to force a withdrawal to fail execution until a certain time, right? When they can gain some sort of leverage over the system. So if they fail to cancel the withdrawal, there's a chance that an attacker can leverage that and basically use it to arbitrage / manipulate the protocol. So if you go to cancel withdrawal, again, we see the first thing that happens is they attempt to get it. They attempt to get this withdrawal, and then they check if it's a empty withdrawal. So if I find this execute function again, and we find my tag, once they remove it, once they remove the withdrawal from the store, now when they try to get it, when they cancel, it's going to revert right here. So the withdrawal isn't canceled, the whole transaction reverts, and the withdrawal is still in the store waiting to be executed by the keeper. And if the keeper is basically an automated script, it's going to essentially just execute things when it can successfully execute them. Cool. So, and the reason I get a little bit excited here is because I see some swaps that are happening after this. And I see a really, really good opportunity to make this transaction actually just fail and then revert, right? So I'm not gonna follow this particular thread to its end, just because I don't want to give you guys what I feel is going to end up being a critical vulnerability here for free. You're going to have to figure that one out for yourself, come up with your own POC. But this is definitely something that I'm going to be leaving a tag for and coming back to and POCing it out, fleshing it out, seeing exactly what the attacker can do. Cool, so I know I kind of jumped the horse there and got a little excited and sort of went straight into this function all the way to near the end, but that was just because I had a feeling that something like this would happen, and you sort of get a feeling for that if you find the types of vulnerabilities elsewhere in this particular protocol that end up causing issues with the system of the two-step execution. And then when you go to other places, you'll say, oh, I recognize this sort of pattern, and I think that there might actually be an issue here. So basically, I'm going to go back up to the top of this function, and I'm going to do it the right way. And I'm going to now actually walk through and just get a high-level understanding of what's going on in this function, what are all these variables, what's this cache here, and why are we doing those swaps. Cool. So I keep seeing this get enabled market function. Before clicking into it, my intuition says that it validates that it is like an actual market address that's like an actual market within the protocol, and that maybe it's turned on or something like this. So I'm going to click in and just quickly validate my suspicion. Okay, cool. Yeah, so basically along those lines, yeah, it looks like we're getting the actual market from the store, and then this is going to be a uninitialized, it's going to be an uninitialized market if it's not a market actually within the protocol, and then that's not going to pass the validation. And then here they also check if it is an actual market that is not disabled. And you can see I've actually already been to this part of the protocol, and this is because this validation function is used elsewhere, of course, where they're also using markets, right? Yeah, and you can see I've just left some like sort of gas questions. My thoughts on gas findings are, if you see them in the code, leave an audit tag and throw them in the report if they're valid, if they're significant. But by no means are they the focus when we're talking about protocols that are not on mainnet and are going to end up holding, hundreds of millions of dollars of value locked. For these protocols, we are really mainly concerned with preventing critical exploits, right? Cool. So I see they initialize a cache. One thing that always scares me when I'm reading through these functions and I see them just initialize a cache somewhere is that, these caches are sometimes quite big. And I'm sure if I check this one, there's a few things on here, and there's always an opportunity for them to, accidentally, errantly not initialize one of these fields. So that's always something that I flag, and I always double check these because you never know. All it takes is that one time. And for instance, like the default value of UINT 256 on this long token output amount, if that doesn't get set, then that's potentially a user withdrawing and then literally not getting their funds. So yeah, these are very important, could be a very easy high vulnerability to find. So I'm just going to go back here and leave a note to come back and validate this. Okay, so this is interesting. I'm seeing this get output amounts. I'm not going to go into this function right now, but I have a feeling that this is maybe factoring in some sort of price impact, fees, although it looks like fees happen right here. But yeah, I think mostly probably price impact. something like this. So I'm seeing possibly price impact happens here. We've got some fees, and this is interesting, is that they calculate long token fees and then they get short token fees, which makes sense if you're going to be withdrawing both tokens. I'm slightly interested to see how this is going to work with an included swap path. For instance, if there's an opportunity for these fees to be charged twice somehow. I'm not too confident that that is going to happen, or that there's a possibility for that, but there's a non-zero chance, so I'm going to write it down here to look into. I see that we basically just increment the claimable fees and just checking that we do it twice and we do it for the right amount. So this is going to be the long token for the long token fees and the short token for the short token fees. That looks good. Okay, so it looks like now we've done the fees. It looks like now we're doing the accounting portion of this. The accounting is always interesting, something to pay very close attention to, because a mistake in the accounting is almost always a high or critical risk, because oftentimes even just a small mistake in the accounting can yield insolvent markets. People can't exit their position, people can't withdraw liquidity, people withdraw more liquidity than they should be, people get more profit than they should be, things like this. Reading this, I know I definitely want to come back and sort of like draw out a map, a graph, a chart of the structure of the fees, because often what we'll find is they might be double feeing something, or the accounting might not be just right when they're doing things like this, where they're subtracting the fee amount for pool, depending on what the fee amount for pool is made up of. They could be double counting something, they could be not counting something. So I definitely want to come back and sort of chart this out and see, is everything being accounted for, and is it being accounted for only once? All right, I'm going to cut it here. Let me know if there are any areas of the code base that you want to see next, and we can sort of dive deeper and explore this code base as we go through the audit together. If you'd like to have a place to ask any questions you have, join ongoing study sessions and more surrounding the GMX audit, go to lab.guardianaudits.com and join our community of like-minded aspiring auditors who are all growing together. When we're not collaborating on the GMX audit, we run practice audits where you can team up with other aspiring auditors from all over the world and conduct an audit of a real protocol, and even shadow audits where you can join the Guardian team and help us as we audit a industry leading project. All right, that's all for this time. I'll see you in the next one.